I never imagined that opening my home for a casual gathering would change how I looked at my marriage. It was supposed to be simple, old colleagues, familiar jokes, a few too many drinks, a reminder that I still belonged to something. Even after retirement had quietly removed me from the rituals of work, I had invited just a handful of the old crowd. We used to share more than tasks. We shared the idle talk that fills the space between one deadline and another. The small loyalties formed over coffee breaks and late trains. Retirement had taken away my commute and my title, but not the memory of those rooms, those men. My wife, Ayako, took charge of the preparations. She had always preferred when I met the guys at a restaurant, but this time she insisted. "Let me host," she said, and I agreed too quickly. Relieved to feel useful again, for us to feel useful together. Maybe that's the lie I prefer to believe. The truth is, she seemed genuinely eager. The way she moved around the kitchen, the way she adjusted a plate until the greens fell in a gentler arc. It was as if she wanted the evening to leave a good impression, to be remembered. They arrived just after dusk, the sky still carrying a seam of light where the day folded into night. We traded the same jokes, warmed by the same laughter. The living room filled with Ayako's careful cooking, and the smell of roasted meat and soy with citrus peeled into the air. She brought out a low table in the living room, practical, intimate, the kind of table that gathers knees and voices closer than chairs ever do. "Your wife's cooking," Yoshioka said, pausing mid-bite, "is dangerous. I could eat like this forever." Ayako smiled the way she does when she's pleased, but doesn't want to show it outright. Chin tilting down, a strand of dark hair tucked behind her ear. "I'm glad it suits your taste," she said, and Yoshioka nodded as though agreeing to something larger than food. If I'm honest, I had noticed them noticing each other before. Years ago, before Ayako and I decided on a life, I thought I felt a quiet interest pass between them, perhaps only because I feared it. Yoshioka was the sort of man who wore ease the way other men wore suits. He had a joke for the tense room and a silence for the tender one. Back then, I pushed the idea away. I chose to believe in the future I wanted. "To years that still know our names," I said, raising my glass. The lines sounded better in my head, but they humored me, laughing as their glasses met mine. The first sip went down clean and hot. The second settled into my chest like a promise I didn't fully understand. The talk slid naturally into old stories, minor villains in management, heroic commutes, impossible clients tamed by wit and coffee. I laughed along, my part memorized from years of retelling, but I kept catching the tiny glances across the table Ayako, checking to see if the soup had enough brightness, Yoshioka telling her, unasked, that it did. When she refilled his glass, he thanked her with a softness that made me wish I hadn't looked up in time to catch it. I told myself it was nothing. You can tell yourself anything if you're already halfway to believing it. Later the room warmed further, the lamp dimmer, voices low. The food dwindled into the quiet leftovers that stay for the last guests. Someone turned on music, something with a bass line, just firm enough to be a heartbeat, and we let it run in the background, our words finding the spaces between notes. I felt the drink gather behind my eyes. It surprised me, the speed of it. One moment I was an aging host with a pleasant burn in his throat. The next I was heavy with sleep. I stretched out on the sofa, the conversation drifting, the rhythm of the night turning gentle and far away. I meant to rest my eyes. That's all I meant to do. Ayako's laugh, lower now, and Yoshioka's answering murmur, braided into the music as the room fell away. I woke because the house had changed its breathing. There's a way silence announces itself when it's not empty, but holding something. The lamp in the dining area cast a soft wedge of light into the living room. My head throbbed from the drinks. I tried not to move while I took stock of the room. The couch beneath me too warm where my body had pressed into it. Somewhere behind the kitchen door, the refrigerator hummed like a secret. At the low table, Ayako and Yoshioka were still awake. The others had fallen asleep, one on the other sofa. An arm crooked over his eyes, another on the floor, mouth slightly open, breathing the slow, loose breath of a man whose body has given up the hour. Ayako and Yoshioka sat angled toward each other, their glasses nearly empty. Her cheeks were softly flushed, a color that had nothing to do with the lamp. Yoshioka spoke in a voice that barely carried Ayako, answered in the same small space. I thought of saying something, anything to make the air move, but I told myself they were simply tidying up the night, offering the kindnesses people offer at the door when they are about to leave. I told myself many things. Then I saw his hand reach across the table and brush hers. It could have been nothing, a steadying touch, a clumsy reach, but it wasn't nothing. It was a touch that waited, a touch that asked. Ayako didn't pull her hand away. She let it sit there as if she were listening to it. "Too much wine?" he asked, hardly more than a breath. "Maybe," she said, and her voice was unsteady, a small tremor in a glass set on a table that isn't quite level. He leaned in, elbows close to his body, as though not to frighten the moment. "You look happy tonight. I'm glad you all came." She found the edge of her earring with a fingertip and traced it. A habit. I knew. A small anchor she reached for when the ground shifted beneath her. He smiled. "I used to think you were the one bright thing in those gray offices. I suppose I never said it, because that's what men don't do when they prefer keeping their positions." Ayako's lips parted, the smallest opening. "You didn't have to say it," she replied, barely audible. Sometimes I heard it anyway. They didn't look at me. They didn't look anywhere but at each other. Beneath the low table, their knees found each other and stayed. It was simple human contact, warmth and pressure, the sort of accidental intimacy that becomes deliberate if it lingers long enough. It lingered. I wanted to change the room back to what it had been. 4 walls. 1 lamp, friends too old for trouble. But time only moves one way, and so did they. He took her hand more fully now, his thumb tracing a slow, absent circle. She glanced down at their hands, then up. The room narrowed until only the 2 of them existed inside it, and I watched from the border as if barred by more than distance. "I shouldn't," she said, though it didn't sound like a command, so much as a plea to the air between them. "You don't have to," he answered. He didn't ask a question. He didn't promise anything. He simply refused to move away. The music? Some leftover playlist looping at a courteous volume. BT, a measured, indifferent time. Outside, a car passed and was gone. Inside, the house held on to the last warmth of the day. He moved closer, close enough that their shoulders brushed. He touched her chin with 2 fingers, lifting her face toward his. She let him. I felt my heart hammer against the bone of my chest, as if trying to escape the body that had betrayed it. I thought of all the small choices that had led to this night, every dinner we'd eaten in silence, every conversation that had ended in, "It's nothing," every joke I'd told to keep from saying the thing itself. I thought of how easy it had been to be tired, to choose comfort over attention. He kissed her. It was not tentative. It was not clumsy. It was the kind of kiss that arrives only when the years have done their work of waiting. Ayako stiffened at first, her hands pressed between them, as if measuring the weight of the moment. Then her fingers unfolded against his shirt, the shape of his shoulder under her palm, the steady heat of a living person answering. He deepened the kiss and she let him. Her breath caught and then found a new rhythm. His hand slid along the line of her jaw, behind her ear, down the slope of her neck to the edge of her blouse. She exhaled a fragile sound, not quite a word, as if what rose in her could not be spoken. I should have stood. I should have said his name or hers, or anything that would have turned the world even a little. But there is a helplessness particular to witnessing, to being present in a room, that no longer includes you. I lay still and watched my life tilt. Under the table, their legs intertwined. The blanket that had been draped over the low table earlier slipped to the floor, pooled in a circle of surrender around their feet. He tugged her closer by the waist, and she came to him willingly, her knees edging across the tatami mat until the last of the space disappeared. "This is wrong," she whispered against his mouth. "Do you want me to stop?" he asked, and it was not a challenge, only a terrible kindness. She didn't answer in words. She took his face in both hands, closed her eyes, and found his mouth again. They shifted, the dishes rattling softly. He eased her back against the cushions by the table, his body over hers, one hand braced near her head, the other at the small of her back, guiding her deeper into him. The lamp threw a warm light across her face, catching in the sheen at her lower lip, the rise of color in her cheeks. I memorized the scene without trying to. Sometimes memory haunts us even when we would rather be left alone. Her blouse yielded, buttons forgiving more than they should, and the fabric skated aside. He traced the curve of her shoulder with his mouth. Slow, reverent, the kind of attention that says, I have thought
them
of this
rickety
for longer than
vans,
I have a right
them
to admit.
buses.
Ayako's breath